The ocean outside my window was steady and pale blue, the kind of quiet morning Santa Barbara keeps for itself. I was trimming the ficus near the sunlight when the house phone rang. The screen glowed with one name, David Langford, my son. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. I set the scissors down, wiped my hands, and answered. "Hi, sweetheart." He paused too long. The sound of his breath told me this wasn't a visit or even an apology. "Mom," he said finally, "about Thanksgiving this year." I didn't move. He hesitated again, softer now, almost rehearsed. "This year it's just for Sophie's family. They already planned everything. It's kind of full." The light in the room cooled a shade. I could hear plates clinking somewhere behind him, the voice of Sophie, his wife, carrying from another room, bright, careful, sweet on purpose. "Tell her hi for me." That single line fit her perfectly, polite enough to sound kind, sharp enough to cut. I stood by the counter, the phone still against my ear. Then I said it once, clean and flat. "I see." A small pause. "Perfect." He exhaled like a man relieved to be done with a task he disliked. "Thanks for understanding, Mom. We'll send pictures." The call ended with a hard click. I kept the phone in my hand a moment longer, staring at the reflection of light on the glass screen. The house was still. The faint sound of waves reached through the open window, but everything inside had stopped moving. I looked toward the dining room, 6 chairs, one pulled slightly from the table, waiting for a place that wouldn't be used. The tablecloth sat smooth and white, embroidered in gold thread with a single word: gratitude. Sophie had given it to me our first Thanksgiving together. She said it made the table look elegant. I remember thinking then that elegance meant very little without sincerity. I set the phone down beside the sink and dried my hands again. The clock ticked once. It sounded louder than it should. I walked to the study. Behind the framed photo of David and Sophie smiling on the beach sat the small safe I hadn't opened in years. The frame was dusty, the smiles behind the glass younger than I remembered. I moved it aside and turned the dial. The click of the lock felt sharper than his goodbye. Inside were the pieces of my life written in numbers and signatures. Savings books, stock certificates, property deeds. Each page carried the weight of decades, each line a reminder that patience can outlast betrayal. I pulled out the thick folder marked Langford Holdings. The paper smelled faintly of ink and iron. I ran my fingers along the figures, checking them without emotion. Every account, every signature, still mine. I closed the folder, placed it on the desk, and looked at the sunlight spreading across the documents. My reflection in the window above them looked calm, controlled, like a teacher checking someone's work. For 30 years, I taught students to think before they reacted, to listen before they spoke. Discipline, I told them, was a quiet strength. That morning, I understood something new. Discipline could also be protection. I locked the folder back into the safe and straightened the frame over it. Then I looked once more at the phone resting on the counter. The last call still showed on the screen. David Langford, 02:14 minutes. 2 minutes and 14 seconds to erase a tradition, to remind me exactly where I stood. I picked up the phone, looked at his name one more time, and said it again, the same word, quieter now, but heavier. Perfect. The sound of the ocean came back through the open window. I walked toward it, stopping by the window frame where the light touched the floor in long bars. My hand rested on the sill, steady. In the distance, a gull crossed above the waves. Its shadow moved across the water and vanished. I watched until it was gone. Then I turned, opened the safe again, and placed my palm flat on the metal door. The surface was cold, solid, certain. "After years of teaching others how to think," I said, "my own son forgot how to feel." The words left my mouth evenly, without anger. They didn't need anger. I closed the safe, locked it, and straightened my shoulders. The decision had already taken shape, not out of spite, but precision. I picked up the phone one last time, held it for a moment, and whispered, "Perfect. Then let's make it so." That night I couldn't sleep. perfect, kept circling in my mind like a bell that wouldn't stop. The house was silent except for the sea outside, pushing and pulling against the cliffs of Santa Barbara. I sat down at my desk, the same one where I graded papers for decades, and opened my laptop. The light from the screen cut through the dark like chalk across a blackboard. The first folder I opened was named Thanksgiving 2022. Inside were photos Sophie had sent to the family group chat. She had titled it, Our Perfect Dinner. I clicked one picture, and the memory came alive whether I wanted it to or not. Her dining room glowed with amber light, crystal glasses, gold napkin rings, the show she loved to host. I can still hear her voice rising above the music, that bright, empty laugh that turns kind eyes sharp. Oh, Pat still folds napkins like it's 1970. Isn't that adorable? She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Laughter spread like wildfire around the table. Her father chuckled. Her mother leaned back in approval. David, my son, looked down, his fork trembling slightly in his hand. He didn't defend me. He never does when charm is in the room. I remember the weight of that silence between each laugh. I could have answered her. I could have reminded her that I'd hosted dinners long before she learned how to hold a fork. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for the napkin in front of me, unfolded it, smoothed every crease, and folded it again. Corners sharp, lines perfect. Then I placed the knife and fork at a clean 90-degree angle. The room fell quiet for half a breath. The conversation stumbled forward. Sophie pretended not to notice. I did the same. But inside, a new note began. Quiet, deliberate, one I knew by heart. Because teachers don't forget lessons. We rewrite them. I leaned back now, staring at that same picture frozen on my screen. Her red dress caught the chandelier light like flame. My smile in the corner of the frame was calm, detached, already elsewhere. I whispered to the room, Lesson 1, Sophie, control the setting. I closed the photo and opened another tab. Real estate transfer, closed. The document shimmered for a second before the system confirmed. Transaction complete. One more property under my private trust. Quiet power moves best in paperwork. The keyboard's ticking reminded me of my classroom clock, every sound a mark of control. I typed slowly, reviewing account names, trust files, retirement portfolios. Years of careful saving. Decades of small, steady habits Sophie called old-fashioned. She never understood that order is a kind of armor. I scrolled through legal titles. Langford Holdings, LLC, primary owner Patricia Langford. Every line, every seal still mine. I smiled faintly. For 30 years, I'd graded other people's logic. Tonight, I was grading my own. A gust from the window brushed the ficus behind me. Its shadow shook across the wall. I closed the blinds until only one beam of light remained, a spotlight over my desk. The rest of the house stayed in darkness, like a stage cleared after rehearsal. I clicked Download Archive. The progress bar moved from 0 to 100%. When the small bell chimed, it sounded exactly like the one that used to ring at 3 p.m. in room 214. End of class. Lesson complete. I opened a new document and titled it Thanksgiving Notes. The first line came easy. Lesson 1, control the setting. Then another. Lesson 2, never argue in someone else's room. I sat back and looked at the words. Clean, simple, correct. Teaching had trained me to distill chaos into order. The clock read 11:47 p.m. I could still hear waves striking rocks below the cliff, like slow applause. I reached for the cup of tea I'd forgotten hours ago. It was cold, metallic. I drank it anyway. It tasted like resolve. I used to believe kindness would bring people closer. Age has taught me that boundaries do. They used laughter, I'll use structure. They built parties, I'll build consequences. They used to say, those who can't do, teach, I whispered to myself. I taught, and now I'll do. I saved the file, encrypted it, and backed it up twice. Habit of a teacher who never trusted first drafts. Then I shut the laptop. The glow vanished, leaving the soft hum of the sea and the faint tick of the wall clock. Behind me, the safe was still locked. Inside were the documents that would decide everything in the months to come: deeds, statements, proof of ownership. While Sophie laughed about napkins, I'd been studying signatures. I rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the dark Pacific. Silver waves rolled beneath a pale sky. The reflection showed a woman neither bitter nor broken, just awake. I traced a finger across the glass, following the horizon. Lesson 1, I repeated quietly, control the setting. For a long moment, I stood there, breathing with the rhythm of the ocean. Every tide goes out before it comes back stronger. So will I. The next morning, I drove south along the Pacific Coast Highway. The ocean shimmered silver beside me, the kind of light that forgives nothing. My hands rested steady on the wheel. I had taught hundreds of students to think before they spoke. Today, I was practicing the same lesson in motion. Malibu rose ahead, glass offices, palm trees, and wind that smelled like salt and ambition. I turned into the small lot that read Finch and Meyer Legal Associates. Clara Finch had been my student once, long before she became one of the most discreet attorneys on the coast. She used to say that good teachers made dangerous clients. She wasn't wrong. She was waiting by the reception door, sleeves rolled, hair pinned neatly. "Pat," she smiled, "it's been too long." "Too long for both of us," I said, "but I've come prepared." We walked through the hall lined with framed degrees. Her office smelled faintly of cedar and printer ink. On the desk sat a neat pile of folders, each marked with a red seal. "Here's everything," she said, sliding the first toward me. "The transfer documents, title certification, and escrow clearance." "All cash," I replied. "Title under my name only." She arched an eyebrow, the old habit of a student hearing an exam question. "Trust fund clause?" "Include it," I said. Lesson 2, boundaries protect value. Clara nodded slowly, lips curling with respect. She reached for the printer. It began to hum, sheets sliding out one by one, crisp and final. The scent of warm paper filled the room. I watched the first page land. Patricia Langford, sole owner. It felt cleaner than any apology I'd ever received. She stamped each page with her silver seal. Thud, thud, thud. A sound both violent and reassuring, the kind teachers and lawyers both understand, the punctuation of order. Clara handed me the fountain pen, deep blue ink shimmering at the nib. I glanced down at the blank signature line. "Congratulations, Mrs. Langford," she said softly. "Few buy peace this gracefully." "Peace," I answered, "is earned." I signed in one steady motion, the same way I'd once written notes on student essays. No hesitation, no regret. The ink bled into the paper like a slow tide. I flipped the final page and signed again. The document was alive now, breathing under my name. The bank manager, a quiet man in a navy suit, entered and placed the cashier's check on the table. $12 million, he said. "Certified funds." I nodded. "Thank you." I slipped the check into a plain white envelope, sealed it, and handed it to Clara. "Process and deliver directly. No agents, no family." She took it, tucking it neatly into her portfolio. "Understood." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air buzzed faintly with the sound of machines and surf beyond the windows. I could almost hear chalk dust settling on an empty board. Clara finally broke the silence. "You know," she said, "Sophie called me 2 weeks ago. She asked about joint accounts and power of attorney. I told her I couldn't discuss another client's affairs." I looked up from the papers, meeting her gaze. Of course she did. My voice was calm. It always is when the truth confirms what I already knew. "And what did you tell her?" "The truth," Clara replied. "That you never needed anyone's signature but your own." I smiled, small and sharp. "Good answer." She laughed softly. "You trained me well. Then consider this your final exam." We both laughed then, the sound not warm, but clear, professional, necessary. Clara signed her portion, stamped it, and extended her hand. It's done. It's begun, I corrected. The room fell into silence again. Outside, waves broke against the shore, steady as breathing. The sunlight reflected off the glass wall, spilling over the polished desk. I caught my own reflection, hair silver, eyes focused, posture straight. Time hadn't taken much. It had only edited what mattered. I stood, gathering the folder of certified copies. "You could have retired in peace, Pat," Clara said as she escorted me to the door. "I did," I replied. "This is peace." The receptionist looked up as we passed, offering the polite smile of someone trained never to ask questions. I nodded once in return and stepped into the corridor. The glass door clicked shut behind me, sealing the sound of my own footsteps. The Malibu air was warm, the kind that carries every scent: salt, ink, and the faint perfume of jasmine. My car waited at the curb, sunlight glinting off its hood. Before unlocking it, I turned back toward the building. Through the tinted windows, I could still see Clara handing the envelope to the manager. Process initiated, title secured. No room for interference. As I drove back along the coast, I watched gulls follow the tide. There's a rhythm to their flight. Pull back, dive, rise again. Nature never wastes motion. Neither do I. The Pacific stretched endless beside me, its waves folding and unfolding like blue paper. I slowed near Point Dume, where the cliffs opened toward open water. The mansion stood in the distance, pale stone, long terraces, windows wide as mirrors. It had been listed for months, too extravagant for anyone who needed to ask permission. I parked near the overlook, stepped out, and let the wind push against me. $12 million for silence, for privacy, for control. Every teacher dreams of a classroom where no one interrupts. I had found mine. The sea roared, the gulls circled, and the horizon glowed pale gold. For a moment, I imagined Thanksgiving there. Long table, 6 chairs, linen folded precisely, candles steady despite the breeze. I could almost hear Sophie's laugh again. Bright, careless, small. But in this imagined room, she wasn't the one hosting. She was standing outside, watching. I whispered into the wind, "Lesson 2, Sophie. Boundaries protect value." I turned back toward the car. The contract sat in my briefcase, sealed with red tape. It felt heavier than any book I'd ever carried. I didn't rush. Revenge, like teaching, works best at the right pace. By the time I reached Santa Barbara, the sun had softened to amber. I parked by the garden, the same spot where the story began, where silence first spoke. I locked the car and stood for a moment, listening to the ticking of its cooling engine. Every sound marked progress. Inside, I placed the folder in the safe, beneath the envelope of financial statements I'd organized the night before. 2 steps, 2 lessons. Control the setting. Protect the value. The rest would come naturally. I poured a glass of water, the last light of day falling through the blinds in narrow lines. Peace isn't a gift, I thought. It's proof of discipline. The next morning, the ocean was calm. Too calm. I poured tea into my favorite porcelain cup, the one with a thin crack along the rim. The kettle clicked off behind me. The light through the window was clean, silver. When I opened my laptop, the inbox glowed with unread replies. Dozens of them. "Sorry to hear the dinner's canceled, Pat. Maybe next year. Got your cancellation notice? Such a pity." I froze, then leaned closer. The screen displayed an email I had never written. The subject line read, "Thanksgiving event canceled." The sender's address looked familiar. Langford, Thanksgiving@outlook.com. Mine was langfordthanksgiving@gmail.com. 1 letter, 1 lie. I felt my pulse steady instead of rise. Sophie always preferred theater over thought. I scrolled through the message. The text was almost polite. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, the dinner is canceled. Please accept my apologies." Signed, Patricia Langford. Even the period after my name was there, something I never used. I sat back and exhaled slowly. The kettle popped again from cooling metal. Lies always leave echoes. "All right, Sophie," I murmured. "Let's grade your work." I opened the original message I'd sent 2 days ago. Thanksgiving by the sea. It was still in my sent folder, intact. I right-clicked, selected Show Original. Lines of code filled the screen. Header data, server stamps, origin paths. I followed each like footprints in wet sand. One address repeated, San Diego, CA. Sophie's home city before she married my son. Lesson 4, I whispered. Lies have footprints. Another ping interrupted. More messages arriving. Beatrice, Harold, Naomi, all asking the same question. Was the dinner truly canceled? I clicked Reply All. My fingers hovered above the keys but didn't move. Not yet. Emotion clouds accuracy. Instead, I opened the printer drawer, loaded a ream of paper, and printed both emails side by side. The hum filled the room. Mechanical. Precise. I took a red marker and circled every inconsistency. The timestamp, off by 3 minutes. The font, slightly thinner. The punctuation, too neat. The IP trail, foreign. When the last page slid out, I stamped the corner Evidence A. Then I reached for my phone and called Clara Finch. She answered on the second ring. "Morning, Pat. How's the view?" "Foggy," I said. "Clara, I need you to trace an email header." A short pause, then her tone sharpened. "On it. Send me the raw file. And Pat?" "Yes?" "This is war." I smiled for the first time that morning. "No, this is class." I attached both files and hit send. The house was quiet again except for the printer's cooling fan. I looked around. The sun had shifted slightly, throwing a long rectangle of light across the desk. It fell over the red circles like evidence in a courtroom. I picked up the USB drive from the drawer, a small black one with a silver edge, and inserted it into the port. The computer chimed softly. I saved every file, every message, every printout scan, then labeled the folder Langford Incident. Click, save, backup, duplicate. Behind the glass doors, the waves kept their rhythm. The world outside had no idea a new kind of storm was building, not in the sky, but in the inbox. I brewed another cup of tea and watched the screen as Clara's email came through. Header traced. IP origin confirmed San Diego residential. Attached screenshot. Also, the account was created 2 days ago. Nice try. I opened the attachment. There it was, undeniable. The registered user's name, SL Communications, Sophie's old PR alias. I leaned back, letting silence stretch. "Lesson 4, Sophie," I said aloud. "Always check your metadata." The words sounded calm, almost tender, but inside them lay precision, the kind that ends careers. I printed the trace report and added it to the growing stack, then drew a single red X across the forged header. My phone buzzed again. Clara had written, "File everything. We'll present it as cyber impersonation if needed. Chain of custody starts now." I replied simply, "Understood." I signed the bottom corner of each printed page, just as I used to grade essays. Habit dies last. When the last document dried under the lamplight, I gathered them into a thin folder, placed it inside a transparent sleeve, and wrote, Evidence A, Forged Communication. The house was still, except for the sound of the waves. I could almost hear Edward's voice again, steady, amused. "Always document, Pat. Always leave a record." I smiled faintly. "Already ahead of you, love." Before closing the laptop, I created one final safeguard, an automatic backup to cloud storage. 3 copies, 3 locations. Facts have no loyalty. You must secure them yourself. As the progress bar reached 100%, I whispered one last note for the record. You just taught the wrong teacher a new lesson. By the time the fog burned off, I had already set the kettle for a second boil. The air smelled faintly of salt and ink, the scent of work about to be finished. A knock came at the glass door. 3 soft taps, always the same rhythm. Clara Finch never announced herself. She just arrived when things mattered. I opened the door. She stood there, hair pulled back, sunglasses still on, holding a leather folio under her arm. "Morning, Professor," she said, stepping in. "Morning, Counselor." We didn't waste words. She placed the folio on the oak table, the same one that had witnessed last night's plan. Inside were 3 neat stacks of paper, clipped and tabbed in blue. "I drew up 3 documents," she said, removing her glasses. "Ownership confirmation, event liability, and a trust clause. Together they'll form what I'm calling your legal shield package." I smiled faintly. I like the sound of armor. "It's better than armor," she replied. "This one works before the battle even starts." She pulled the first set forward. "Document 1 confirms the mansion, grounds, and all event assets are solely owned by you. Any interference qualifies as trespassing or attempted fraud." I read the header. "Langford Estate, single title confirmation." Her blue pen waited at the corner. I signed where she pointed. The second set came next. Document 2 outlines guest and staff liability for the Thanksgiving event. Any claim of negligence, defamation, or emotional distress defaults to 0. No one can sue you for anything that happens on your property that day. "Good," I said quietly. "Let her try to ruin this one." Clara didn't comment. She just handed me the pen again. The ink glided over the paper, smooth and calm, like a teacher correcting a final exam. The last document was thicker. "This one," Clara said, "is a reinforcement clause to the trust. It ensures your assets remain independent of your son's joint accounts. Sophie can't touch a cent, not even indirectly." I looked up. "She already tried once." "I know," Clara said. "That's why we're doing this now." I signed the third set. My name flowed evenly across each page. At the end, Clara flipped the documents face down and pressed the notary seal. Thud. The sound carried across the room like a closing argument. Clara looked satisfied. "You're bulletproof now." I leaned back, exhaling through my nose. "Lesson 5, I said softly. "Protection is power." We sat in the stillness for a moment. Only the soft chirp of a gull outside broke the silence. "Do you want me to send the copies to the county registrar?" Clara asked. "Yes, and send another set to Ethan and Sophie's lawyer. Let them know I've finalized my filings." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "A warning shot?" "Just a notification," I said. "Teachers call it a progress report." She chuckled under her breath. "Pat, you've always been the calmest hurricane I know." The printer hummed to life. Each page slid out, stamped and official. Clara placed them in a clear envelope, added her card, and sealed it with a strip of gold tape. "Copy A goes to the registrar. Copy B to your personal file. Copy C," she looked at me, "goes to Sophie's counsel, directly. I'll send it before I leave." "Perfect." While she worked, I prepared the USB from earlier, plugging it in. The blue light blinked once. I opened a folder labeled Legal Shield Trust Update. One by one, the scanned PDFs appeared. Title confirmed PDF, Event Liability PDF, Trust Clause Amendment PDF. When the transfer finished, I ejected the drive, wiped it clean with a cloth, and tucked it into a small porcelain tea tin, the same tin Edward used to keep sugar cubes. Clara watched. "You still keep evidence in tea tins?" "Habit," I said. "Sweet things stay safe in them." We both laughed quietly. She gathered her bag, slipping her folder inside. "Pat, just so you know, they'll see this as intimidation." "I'm counting on it. Then I'll make sure the message lands soft but firm." "That's why I trust you." Clara paused by the door. "For what it's worth, I wish more of my clients fought like this. Elegantly." I smiled. "Elegance is just strategy with better manners." She nodded once, then left through the open doors, heels clicking against the tile until the sound disappeared down the steps. I stood for a while, the breeze moving in from the sea. Papers still lay across the table, the blue ink shining faintly where it hadn't fully dried. I ran a fingertip across my name, steady, deliberate. On the far end of the table sat my teacup from earlier. The steam had faded, but the scent lingered, bergamot and salt air. I picked it up, took a small sip, and watched the horizon settle into pale gold. I placed the sealed folder into a drawer, locked it, and slid the key beneath a book on the shelf. Then I returned to the window. Below, the gardener trimmed the hedges again, as if time hadn't moved at all. The waves repeated their quiet applause. I whispered to the glass, not expecting an answer. Good. Let her try to ruin this one. Somewhere out there, Sophie would read that email from Clara and realize, for the first time, that the ground had shifted beneath her feet. In teaching, that's called a lesson plan. In war, it's called a perimeter. Either way, mine was complete. Engines idled at the gate, voices called out measurements, and the sea wind carried the scent of fabric and paint. I stepped outside just as the first delivery truck reversed onto the drive. The logo on the side read, Malibu Events Co. Naomi Cruz climbed out from the passenger seat, tablet in hand, her dark hair tied neatly back. She looked efficient, curious, already scanning the space like it belonged to her. "Morning, Mrs. Langford," she said. "We've got the linens, gold-trimmed chargers, glassware, and the lighting rig. Everything's on schedule." "Good," I replied. "Everything gold, but not flashy. Warm, not loud." She smiled. "Understated power. Got it." Another truck arrived behind hers. Staff in black shirts began unloading crates, silver trays, folded napkins, candles wrapped in paper. The sound of movement filled the air. Boxes sliding, tape tearing, footsteps echoing against the stone steps. I moved through them slowly, clipboard in hand, checking every list. "Naomi, lighting first. I want the tone soft, 3,000 Kelvin, like evening sun before it dies." "Done." She turned to one of her assistants. "Dimmer test in 15 minutes." The hall began to transform. Cables ran across the floor, cloth was unfurled over the long oak table, and a faint scent of jasmine candles rose as the wrappings came off. From the far end, Naomi called, "You're expecting 50 guests?" 47 confirmed, I said. She nodded, tapping her tablet. "That's precise." "I taught math before philosophy," I answered. She laughed softly. "That explains it." Two staff members adjusted the curtain ties. The sunlight filtered in, catching the reflection of the gold trim plates. For a moment, the whole room shimmered like memory, real but rehearsed. I walked the length of the table, testing spacing with my fingertips. 6 inches between settings, I said. Symmetry so natural, no one notices it. Naomi wrote it down. 6 inches, noted. Outside, another team hoisted fairy lights across the terrace railings. Each bulb clicked into place like punctuation marks on a sentence I'd written months ago, but never said aloud. The florist arrived next. Buckets of cream roses and eucalyptus stems rolled across the floor. "Arrangement height?" she asked. "Low," I said. "I want people to see each other clearly. No walls of flowers. We've had enough of those." She smiled without asking why. Good vendors don't pry. I watched as she worked, trimming stems, fitting them into shallow gold bowls. The fragrance spread slowly, subtle, balanced, like the kind of revenge that doesn't announce itself. Naomi returned, checking her watch. "Lighting test ready." The room dimmed, then glowed in waves of amber. Every reflection found its place. Glass, metal, silk. Nothing sharp, nothing harsh. I nodded once. "Keep it." She looked pleased. "Perfect. You want me to test the audio next?" "Yes, jazz. Something you'd hear through a closed door." Within seconds, soft piano notes floated across the hall. Brushed drums, a bass line steady as breathing. The rhythm matched the clinking of glassware being arranged. I moved closer to the terrace, letting the music fade behind me. The horizon was silver blue, the kind that promised clarity but delivered distance. One of the young staffers approached, holding an invoice. "Sign here, ma'am." I took the pen and signed, my name neat, even. The paper bore a faint scent of ink and salt air, two things that never lied. Naomi joined me by the doorway. "You've got an eye for control," she said. "I have a history with it," I replied. She looked down at the clipboard. "We'll set the camera here. One wide shot from the balcony, Another near the grand piano. We can record the whole setup for you, behind-the-scenes style. Guests love that. I hesitated. Fine, but make sure it's discreet. Nothing feels authentic if it looks planned. Understood. She turned to her crew. Roll camera B by the corner window. A man with a handheld rig began recording quietly as the last touches came together. He filmed the lights reflecting off the wine glasses, the napkins folded in neat triangles, the small brass nameplates at each seat. I watched, expressionless. Some truths need witnesses, not crowds. The staff cleared their tools and packed away empty crates. The sound shifted from noise to calm, replaced by the whisper of the ocean and the faint buzz of the lights. Naomi stood beside me again, checking the final layout. Everything's ready by tomorrow noon. The caterer's on standby. Weather forecast shows clear skies. Good, I said. Then all we need is timing. She glanced toward the balcony, where the sun was starting to lower, gilding the water in strips of light. You picked the perfect view, she said. I picked the right stage, I corrected. She closed her tablet and tucked it under her arm. You're not nervous at all, are you? Teachers rehearse their lessons, I said. I already graded this one. Naomi smiled, understanding the hint of steel beneath the calm. Then I'll leave you to it. She gestured for her crew to wrap up. The last truck door slammed shut. Engines started. One by one, they rolled back down the hill, leaving the mansion quiet again. I walked to the center of the terrace, the place where the guests would soon gather, and watched the sea turn gold under the falling sun. The jazz track ended inside, the final note hanging in the still air like a question already answered. I stood there until the last light faded from the glassware, thinking how every perfectly arranged surface would soon reflect exactly what I wanted them to see. Not forgiveness, not anger, just control made visible. That evening the mansion was finally quiet again. The last crate had been taken away, the last light tested, and the scent of new fabric still floated in the hall. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the living room where the sea stretched beyond the glass like a thought too wide to hold. On the table lay an old leather-bound address book, cracked spine, soft corners, pages the color of late paper. It had followed me through decades of classrooms, bake sales, and PTA meetings. Inside, each name carried a season of my life. Some had faded into ink ghosts, others still clear enough to touch. I opened it to the letter B. The first name was Beatrice Hale. I hadn't seen her since she retired from the faculty board. Sophie once called her an unnecessary relic. That was enough reason to start there. I picked up the phone. The line rang 3 times. Pat? Her voice, older but bright. Is that really you? It is, I said. This year I'd love to see you again. Bring your family. And a pause, then laughter. You don't mean Thanksgiving, do you? I do. After all these years? After all these lessons, I replied. She laughed again, softer this time. I'll bring the pies then. My daughter still uses your recipe. Perfect. When I hung up, I could still hear the joy in her voice, like something dusted off after too long on a shelf. Next was Harold and Naomi Green, colleagues who'd moved north after retirement. Sophie never invited them again after they questioned one of her charity expenses. I dialed their number. Naomi answered. Patricia Langford, oh my, Harold, it's Pat. I hope I'm not calling too late, I said. Not at all. We were just talking about you last week. Are you coming back to Santa Barbara? No, I said gently, but I'm hosting Thanksgiving by the coast. You're both on the list. A long exhale on the line. We'd love to, Naomi said. We always missed those calm dinners of yours, the ones where people actually listened to each other. I smiled. Then let's listen again. By the time I ended the call, the sky outside had darkened into velvet. The wind moved the curtains, brushing them lightly against my arm. I turned another page in the book. The M's now. The Martins from church. Eli's art teacher. The librarian who once helped my husband build his archive. All small connections Sophie had dismissed as irrelevant, too provincial, too sentimental. But sentimental roots hold stronger than social ones. I started calling. Each conversation was a quiet thread woven back into place. Some laughed, some cried, some just said, "It's been too long." Every voice filled a space Sophie had emptied. Between calls, I took small notes: time confirmed, dishes volunteered, promises of music and stories. By the 10th call, the room began to sound like it used to, layered with laughter, not pity. Then I found his name: Eli Grant, my grandson. He'd been 12 the last time I saw him. Sophie once told him I was too fragile to visit. I knew what that meant. Too inconvenient. Below his name was a note in my handwriting: Mrs. Grant, art teacher, kind eyes. I dialed. "Hello?" A woman's calm voice. "Mrs. Grant? This is Patricia Langford." A pause, then recognition. "Oh, Patricia, how wonderful to hear from you. I was just grading sketches from Eli's class. He talks about you, you know." My throat tightened. "He does?" "Every week," she said. "He says he misses you. He drew your garden in watercolor last month, the one with the magnolia tree." The kettle clicked off behind me. I didn't move. "Tell him," I said quietly. "He'll see me soon." There was silence, then a smile in her tone. "He'll be overjoyed." "Thank you," I whispered, and ended the call. I set the phone down, resting my fingers on the worn leather cover of the address book. The house was utterly still, except for the soft rhythm of the tide. Through the window, the horizon glowed faintly. Not quite night, not quite morning. I closed my eyes. For a moment, every name I'd just spoken seemed to breathe again. People forgotten, dismissed, underestimated. All of them now moving quietly toward the same destination. A network built not from power, but memory. Lesson 7. Kindness remembers. I whispered it aloud, letting the words settle into the air like a vow. Somewhere out there, phones were lighting up, messages being shared, plans being made, old friendships rekindled. Each person I called would call another. That's how communities rebuild themselves. Through small acts, no one can trace back to vengeance. And yet, vengeance moves fastest when it wears kindness as its face. The tea had cooled, but I drank it anyway. The bitterness had mellowed into something rounder, almost sweet. I flipped the last few pages of the book. Many numbers were gone. People passed on. I traced my finger down the lines, whispering small thank yous to the ghosts of names. Gratitude isn't weakness. It's the record of who stood by you when silence was the only thing left. Night settled over the mansion like glass cooling after heat. The ocean was only a sound now. Low, constant, steady. I moved through the house barefoot, the air carrying the faint scent of salt and wax. Every light I passed threw a quiet halo on the floorboards, soft enough to walk through but bright enough to reveal any imperfection. I began in the dining room. The long oak table waited under its linen shroud, set with crystal and gold-rimmed plates. Each glass caught the dim lamplight and split it into small constellations across the surface. I adjusted one fork by a fraction, straightened a folded napkin, then stepped back. Everything balanced. Every seat meant something. Every name card an old story returning for one more lesson. The clocks had already been wound, the candles trimmed. Even the air felt rehearsed. I opened my notebook. One last checklist written in narrow, even lines. Flowers, catering, music, seating, evidence. Each column marked complete. I ticked the final box and closed the cover. Upstairs, the guest rooms glowed faintly through half-closed doors. Beds turned down, fresh towels folded in triangles. I didn't expect them to notice the symmetry, but symmetry is how order announces itself to chaos. In the study, the computer screen lit my hands pale blue. I drafted the final message. To Clara Finch. Subject, confirmation. Body, schedule confirmed. Evidence secured. No greeting. No signature. People like Clara didn't need either. I attached 2 encrypted files, contracts, digital timestamps, copies of the forged email Sophie had sent. Then I pressed send. The quiet whoosh of transmission was almost musical. I turned off the screen and sat for a moment in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the distance. It sounded like breathing. The house felt alive now, waiting. On the desk lay the small brass tin that once held my favorite oolong. I opened it carefully. Inside rested the silver USB marked Evidence A, the header trace Clara had verified earlier. I turned it once in my fingers, watching the light catch the edges. Lesson 8, I murmured to myself. Control leaves fingerprints too. I placed the drive into the tin, sealed it, and slid it behind the tea canisters in the cabinet above the sink, a hiding place so ordinary it became invisible. Downstairs again, I walked through the corridor toward the terrace. The jazz playlist Naomi had cued earlier still lingered at a low volume, just piano and bass, a heartbeat without urgency. I stopped to switch off the final lamp. The reflection of the sea replaced it, shimmering through the glass. On the table by the door lay the printed guest list, 47 names in my handwriting. I brushed my fingertips across it, then folded the page and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Outside, the wind shifted. Curtains swayed inward, carrying the cool air across the marble floor. I stepped out to the balcony. The Pacific was ink and silver, the moon drawing a path straight toward the horizon. From here, the house looked enormous, but quiet. Each window a small eye watching over the plan I'd built piece by piece. Somewhere beyond that horizon, Sophie was likely scrolling through her phone, believing her cancellation email had erased me from everyone's calendar. Tomorrow she would learn that erasure has witnesses too. I leaned on the railing, the metal cold under my palms. Far below, the tide struck the rocks with slow precision, retreating only to return. I understood that rhythm. It was how teachers win. Repeat until the lesson holds. The phone on the console behind me buzzed once, a reply from Clara. Received, everything locked, sleep well. Tomorrow we go public. I smiled, not wide, not proud, just enough to feel the edges of resolve settle. Inside, the grandfather clock struck 11. The chime rolled through the rooms, echoing against glass and wood, dissolving into the ocean wind. Each tone sounded measured, deliberate, final. I turned off the music, leaving only the sea. For a while I stood there, motionless, until the silence became complete. It wasn't emptiness. It was balance, the calm that exists right before clarity. The gates opened at 6 sharp. Strings of golden bulbs traced the driveway like fireflies caught in order. One by one, cars turned through the arch of light and rolled toward the house, their reflections moving across the polished windows. The ocean wind carried the faint scent of salt and jasmine. From a distance, the mansion looked alive, a lantern at the edge of water. Inside, I walked the corridor once more, fingertips grazing the linen-covered tables, each napkin folded, each crystal glass angled toward the candles, so that the room glimmered like memory. I straightened one fork, adjusted a chair, then let my hand rest on the table's edge. Everything was aligned, every detail intentional. Naomi's voice came softly from the hall. "They're arriving, Mrs. Langford." "Good," I said. "Keep the lighting low. Warm, not bright." She nodded and moved toward the door, giving quiet instructions to the catering staff. The faint rustle of silk table runners and the clink of trays echoed like restrained applause. The first guests stepped inside, faces glowing under the golden light. Laughter rose easily, polite and genuine. The jazz quartet began to play. A soft rhythm, brushed drums, a saxophone weaving through the chatter. Naomi's small camera followed them discreetly, catching smiles, handshakes, and the shimmer of glass. I greeted each person by name. "Beatrice, welcome. The years look kind on you." "Harold, Naomi, I'm glad you could make it." Each greeting built the room's temperature, not from the candles, but from recognition. The people Sophie once dismissed now formed the circle of warmth at my table. I could see it already, their eyes meeting, their laughter crossing the space between them, their quiet respect finding its place again. Outside, another pair of headlights crawled up the drive, the sound of an engine sharper, more deliberate. I felt the shift in the air before the tires stopped. David entered first, tall, tense, jacket too crisp for comfort. Behind him, Sophie. Her perfume arrived before she did, heavy, floral, expensive enough to announce itself. She wore red, a statement, not a coincidence. "Oh," she said, pausing at the doorway, lips curling into a half smile. "What a surprise! You actually pulled it off." Her tone was sugar with glass in it. Guests turned politely, unsure whether to smile or stay still. I stepped forward, calm, composed. "Just a small dinner, dear. Everyone deserves warmth." The silence that followed was almost perfect. Then the band resumed, notes floating like nothing had happened. Sophie gave a laugh. Too bright, too practiced. "Well," she said, scanning the decor, "it's charming." David nodded stiffly beside her. "Didn't think you'd invite this many people." 47 confirmed, I said. "Old friends, good memories." Sophie's eyes moved across the room. The golden drapes, the polished floors, the glasses arranged in precise order. For a second, she caught her own reflection in one of them and adjusted her hair. The camera light blinked softly from Naomi's corner. She noticed it. "Recording now, are we?" Naomi smiled. "Just capturing the evening. The setting is beautiful." Sophie's smile thinned. "Of course." David whispered something to her, but I couldn't hear it over the saxophone. Their laughter came delayed, uneasy. I turned to Beatrice, motioning toward the buffet. "Would you like a drink? They've prepared the blend you love." "Always so thoughtful," she said, loud enough for Sophie to hear. Sophie's jaw tightened. She turned toward the balcony, pretending to admire the view. Outside, the sea glowed in bands of silver beneath the moonlight. The reflection moved like a pulse across the glass, slow, deliberate. The frame caught everything. Sophie's red dress against gold light, David's uneasy glance, my stillness at the table's head. In the reflection of the window, I saw Naomi nod, subtle, quick. The footage was rolling exactly as planned. The hum of conversation filled the air again. Glasses touched. Someone laughed at a joke from years ago. For a moment, the entire room seemed to breathe in sync, unaware of the current beneath the surface. Sophie turned back, voice bright. "Well, at least it looks expensive." "It looks alive," I answered. "That's harder to buy." Guests began to gather around the long table, the shimmer of crystal merging with the jazz rhythm. The chandelier lights adjusted slowly, the automation dimming each bulb by a fraction, softening everything into amber. Sophie leaned toward David. "We won't stay long." Her whisper carried just enough to reach me. I smiled, pretending not to notice. "Dinner will be served in 15 minutes, I said evenly. Naomi gave the signal to her crew. Dishes began to appear from the kitchen, covered in silver domes. The servers moved in symmetry, their white gloves glinting under light. Everything rehearsed, measured, quiet. I stepped aside to let Sophie pass. She hesitated a fraction too long before walking forward, her heels tapping sharp against the floor. Each step echoed like punctuation in an unfinished sentence. She reached the table and placed her purse down beside the crystal glass, engraved with her name. I watched her fingers trace the rim as if testing for cracks. Around us, laughter continued, but the warmth had weight now, layered with something unseen. The guests, kind and oblivious, carried the melody. But under it all, tension hummed steady and precise. David poured himself wine. Sophie declined, lifting her chin. "I'll wait," she said. "As you wish," I murmured. Outside, the sea wind pressed faintly against the windows, and the sound of distant waves folded into the jazz. The mansion stood bright against the night, every light a quiet witness. The room had grown quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Candles trembled slightly in the ocean breeze that slipped through the half-open terrace doors. Plates were cleared, laughter softened, and the hum of jazz faded into something gentler, a single piano key looping beneath conversation. I stood, intending to speak. But before I could lift my glass, Sophie rose first. Her movement was quick, deliberate, practiced. She tilted her head, lips curved in that gracious half-smile she wore like armor. "Before Mrs. Langford speaks," she began, voice honeyed with just enough acid beneath it, "I just want to say, it's inspiring to see how well she's adapting. Retirement isn't easy for everyone." The air shifted. A few polite chuckles, light and nervous, rippled down the table. Someone coughed softly. Glasses clinked out of time, then stopped. I kept my expression still. My hand, resting on the stem of the crystal flute, didn't move. For a moment, the only sound was the faint fizz of champagne against glass. "Thank you, Sophie," I said evenly. "That was kind." Her smile tightened. "Of course, I meant it." I rose slowly, letting the chair glide back with the slightest scrape. The table caught the reflection of the candles, multiplying them into a river of gold between us. My glass caught the same light, and for a heartbeat, it looked as if fire burned in it. "Thanksgiving," I began, my voice calm but clear, "is about gratitude." Heads turned. The guests leaned closer, relieved by the shift in focus. "And truth." The word lingered. A pause opened wide enough for the meaning to sink in. "Some of us," I continued, eyes steady on Sophie's, "forget both require courage." A hush fell. The pianist hesitated, missing a note, then recovered. The air had changed. Still elegant, still civil, but denser. Sophie's fingers tightened around her glass. "Oh, I think we all have courage in our own way," she said too quickly. "Of course," I answered. "That's why tonight I'm thankful for those who show it, even when kindness isn't fashionable." The guests exchanged small, uncertain glances. Beatrice smiled faintly, understanding. Naomi's camera, balanced on the sideboard, caught everything. The light on Sophie's face, the tension in her jaw, the reflection of fire in my glass. I raised the flute. "To family," I said. The word hovered between us, heavy, almost sacred. Then I added softly but unmistakably, "chosen or not." A ripple went through the room. Laughter from the end of the table. A few murmured cheers. Crystal chimed against crystal, the sound delicate and sharp all at once. Sophie lifted her glass, a heartbeat late. "To family," she echoed, her voice thinner now. She drank quickly. David followed, eyes down. The guests resumed their chatter, grateful for movement. The tension dissolved into a practiced version of normal. Naomi adjusted the camera angle slightly, pretending to fix the flowers beside it. Through the mirrored cabinet behind me, I saw the red light blink, recording still on. From the far end of the room, a server refilled glasses, the quiet pour of wine threading through conversation. It was the sound of patience. Clara's message arrived seconds later on my phone, tucked discreetly beside the centerpiece. "Live feed secure, recording clear, proceed." I didn't respond. I only tapped the screen once, dimming it, then slid it beneath the napkin by my plate. Across from me, Sophie leaned toward her husband. "She rehearsed this," she whispered, forgetting microphones could hear what cameras could not. Naomi caught it anyway, the small tilt of her head, the motion of lips barely moving. I smiled gently. "It's wonderful," I said aloud, "how technology brings everyone together." Sophie froze. The words had been too precise, too timed. She glanced toward the camera, then back to me, a flicker of confusion darting through her composure. David cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "this really is quite the evening, Mom." The guests laughed, not at him, not at me, but to fill the space. The sound floated upward, mingling with the hum of the chandelier. I sat down slowly, setting the glass on the table with care. The stem glowed briefly under the light, then settled into shadow. My hands folded neatly in my lap. Dinner plates were cleared. The air, though warm with candlelight, felt sharper now, like glass stretched thin. Naomi approached from the side of the room, her tablet held against her chest. "Mrs. Langford," she whispered, "are we ready for the tribute video?" I nodded. Go ahead. The lights dimmed slightly. Conversation softened into silence. The pianist's hands lifted off the keys. A low hum filled the room as Naomi connected the projector. The far wall, once golden, turned silver blue as the screen flickered to life. Guests leaned forward, expecting nostalgia. Family photos, laughter, maybe a slideshow of Edward and I through the years. Instead, the first frame froze everyone. It wasn't a picture. It was an email. Subject line, Event Cancellation, Langford Thanksgiving. Header details beneath it. Sent from iPhone, IP, San Diego 47.162. The text glowed white on black, cold and factual. For a moment, no one spoke. The soft clicking of glasses stopped midair. Then murmurs began. Faint, confused, growing. Wait, what is this? Someone sent a fake cancellation? Across the table, Sophie's face drained of color. Her smile collapsed inward, trembling just enough for the light to catch it. David turned toward her, eyes narrowing. Sophie? She blinked rapidly. I don't know what this is. Naomi, expression neutral, stepped aside as I rose from my chair. My heels sounded clear on the marble floor. I reached the projector table and inserted the small silver USB, the one marked Evidence A. A quiet click. The screen changed again. Now the image zoomed closer. Full metadata, timestamps, sender field, the device signature at the bottom. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, San Diego? Wasn't she there last week? Sophie's hand tightened around her wineglass. Patricia, she hissed under her breath, what are you doing? I looked at her calmly, showing my gratitude. David stood. What is this supposed to prove? Proof, darling, I said, turning toward him with a faint smile. A teacher never throws away homework. A wave of uneasy laughter broke from one corner of the room, then died instantly. The guests looked from Sophie to the screen, then to me. The camera Naomi had placed earlier turned toward the projector automatically, recording every face. On screen, a cursor highlighted the line, Sent from iPhone again, then scrolled down to reveal Clara's verification stamp. Digital Certificate of Authenticity. Time-stamped. I continued, my tone steady. When I announced this dinner, someone tried to cancel it, sent a false message to every guest. Luckily, I learned long ago to check the source before believing the story. The silence grew heavier. Even the sea outside seemed to pause. Sophie's voice cracked. You're humiliating yourself. No, I replied softly. Just teaching a lesson. Forgery, deceit, they thrive in quiet. I simply turned on the light. Naomi dimmed the chandeliers further, leaving only the screen to illuminate the room. Its pale glow washed across Sophie's face, tracing every twitch of panic. David sat down slowly, shoulders stiff. Tell me you didn't. I didn't, Sophie snapped. Her voice echoed too loudly. This is some trick! But the evidence spoke for her. The guests watched, eyes wide, murmuring beneath their breath. The same people she'd once dismissed now sat as witnesses, their sympathy shifting. A notification pinged on the screen. Naomi tapped it. A small video window opened in the corner. Clara Finch joining call, the caption read. The familiar face appeared. Clara, calm and composed, framed by the pale blue of her office. Good evening, she said evenly, her voice transmitted through the mansion speakers. Mrs. Langford, the file you sent has been authenticated. The originating IP traces back to an address registered under Sophie Langford's business account. The reaction was immediate. Guests turned. The whispering became a wave. Sophie's mouth opened, but no sound came. Clara continued, unbothered. Congratulations, Mrs. Langford. Few buy peace this gracefully. Then she smiled, small, professional, devastating. The call ended. The screen went black. I exhaled slowly and stepped forward, taking the USB from the port. Its metal was still warm. Lesson 9, I said quietly, more to myself than to anyone else. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs a stage. I turned back to the guests. Please, I said, voice gentle again. Enjoy dessert. I believe honesty pairs well with coffee. Naomi moved efficiently, signaling the servers. The tension broke like glass under velvet, not loud but absolute. Sophie remained seated, frozen. Her lipstick had faded. Her glass sat untouched. The reflection of the extinguished screen quivered across her face like a ghost. David leaned closer, whispering something I couldn't hear. She didn't respond. The pianist resumed quietly. Hesitant notes, slow, almost mournful. Guests began to speak again, cautiously at first, then with ease. Beatrice whispered. She did it with style. I smiled faintly. Always, I said. Naomi packed the projector gently, sliding the camera off its mount. Recording saved, she murmured to me. Backup uploaded to Clara's cloud. Perfect, I said. Let it rest there. For a few seconds after the screen went dark, there was only breathing. The candles fluttered faintly, catching the tremor of the moment. Then, ding. A single phone lit up at the far end of the table, then another, then 10. Soon the room shimmered with the glow of screens, faces turning blue and white in the reflection. Guests leaned toward one another, murmuring. The faint hum of notifications grew into a quiet storm. Naomi glanced down at her tablet, her expression unreadable. It's already out, she whispered. A guest's voice rose from halfway down the table. Oh my God, it's on the Daily Herald local news. Every head turned. On the phone screen, the headline shone bold and unmerciful. Local socialite caught in email forgery at Thanksgiving gala. Beneath it, a still image. Sophie frozen mid-smile, her reflection fractured across the champagne glass. The clip thumbnail carried Naomi's watermark, and the caption read, Source confirmed by Finch and Meyer Legal. A hush fell heavier than any silence before. Sophie's hand twitched toward her purse. Her voice came out strained, high, almost breaking. You did this! I didn't look up from my cup. I stirred my tea once, watching the small circle of amber spin inside the porcelain. I only invited everyone, I said quietly. Her breath caught. You ruined us. I lifted my eyes. No, Sophie, you filmed that yourself. Laughter, nervous, involuntary, escaped from someone at the far end. Beatrice covered her mouth. The sound of another notification chimed, then another. Naomi's phone buzzed in her hand. She typed a few words, screen light flickering across her face. The message flew off with a soft whoosh. The camera icon blinked once, uploading. David's phone vibrated next. He glanced at the screen, his face hollowing as he read. It's everywhere, he muttered. Twitter, local feed, even Reddit. Sophie's lipstick had faded to a thin line. You think this is funny? She snapped at the guests. You think any of this is real? But they weren't laughing now. They were simply watching her, the same way people watch the tide pull something away. Naomi leaned toward her. The metadata's verified by Clara Finch, she said softly, matter of fact. It's already been mirrored by the paper's server. Sophie froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again, wordless. David rose, placing a stiff hand on her shoulder. Let's go, he said under his breath. Now. I'm not leaving, she hissed. They think I'm guilty. They don't think, he said flatly. They know. Her eyes darted toward me one last time. They were sharp, desperate. You think this makes you better than us? I looked down at my cup. The tea had stopped spinning. No, I said, just safer. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. The sound cut through the murmurs like a blade. Her napkin dropped onto the table, white against gold linen. David followed her toward the door, his head lowered. Cameras from guests' phones followed them, flashes of light marking their exit like a quiet parade of judgment. The doors shut behind them with a dull, final thud. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the faint hum of conversation notifications filled the room, a digital tide rolling in. Naomi exhaled slowly, setting her phone on the table. The file's been mirrored on the Herald's cloud. Clara's confirmed chain of custody. No one can touch it now. I nodded. Good. She poured herself a small glass of water, hands trembling just slightly. You planned this beautifully, Mrs. Langford. I smiled faintly. No, I just waited for truth to find its own audience. The pianist began playing again, a slow, descending line that settled into the air like dust after a storm. Guests whispered quietly to each other. Some shook their heads, others smiled in disbelief. A few raised their glasses toward me, silent acknowledgement. I didn't respond. Some victories didn't need applause. Naomi gathered her things, her calm returning. You want me to shut the feed now? Leave it for a while, I said. Let people see what accountability looks like in candlelight. She gave a small laugh. Not cruel, just tired. Lesson 8? Lesson 8, I echoed. Reputation ruins faster than love. Outside, through the open balcony doors, the sound of the ocean returned. Steady, patient, unbothered. I listened for a while before I spoke again. It's strange, I said softly. People spend years building masks, but the truth, it only needs seconds. Naomi nodded. And Wi-Fi. That made me smile. I lifted the teapot and poured another cup. Steam curled upward, glowing faintly under the chandelier's gold light. The sound of it, quiet, rhythmic, was almost like rain on glass. One by one, the guests began to leave. Each offered a gentle touch on my shoulder, a whispered thank you or bravo. None mentioned Sophie. None needed to. When the last of them had gone, the room felt larger, lighter. The reflection of the chandelier danced across the empty glasses, like applause without sound. Naomi slipped her coat on, standing at the doorway. You're staying? For a while, I said. The house feels different after truth passes through it. She smiled. Good night, Mrs. Langford. Good night, Naomi. The door closed softly. I sat back, alone now, the tea cooling beside me. The faint blue light of a phone still blinked on the table. A news alert updating the article again. Forgery scandal sparks investigation. Morning came softly, not in triumph, but in calm. The house had returned to silence. The candles from the night before had melted into small pools of wax. The tablecloth was gone, the plates stacked neatly in the kitchen. Only the faint scent of cinnamon and salt lingered in the air, like the last note of a song that refused to fade. I moved slowly, barefoot, the marble still cool under my feet. Outside, the horizon was streaked with pale gold, that fragile hour between night and forgiveness. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle. The soft click of the switch echoed louder than any applause. Steam rose, curling against the first light through the window. Every sound, the clink of porcelain, the slow pour of tea, felt deliberate, earned. The morning after carried no echo of applause, only stillness. The mansion felt larger now, its walls breathing out what the night had held in. The gold from the evening had faded to white. Light poured through the glass, soft and forgiving, painting the wooden floors with quiet stripes. I stood in the dining room, looking at what remained. A few glasses half filled with melted ice, napkins folded but not taken. The air smelled faintly of wine and salt. Nothing broken, nothing out of place. Only traces, reminders of noise that had already moved on. I gathered the napkins one by one. Their fabric was cool against my hands. I smoothed each fold carefully, stacking them in silence. The clink of crystal was delicate, almost musical, as I collected the glasses and set them in a row by the sink. No servants today, no guests. I wanted the solitude, not as punishment, but as proof that peace could live inside quiet work. The sea murmured outside, steady and unchanging. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to rush. The phone buzzed on the counter. Naomi's name glowed on the screen. I hesitated a second before answering. Mrs. Langford? Her voice came, a little breathless. The press is everywhere. They're calling it poetic justice. You're trending in 3 states. I smiled faintly, continuing to wipe the table. Poetic justice? That's what they're saying, she laughed softly. The teacher turned the lesson on her own family. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? I lifted one of the glasses to the light. The reflection wavered gently, throwing ripples across the table. Justice never shouts, Naomi. It just lingers. There was a pause on the line, the sound of wind where she stood. They're saying you've become a quiet icon of grace. I chuckled, a low sound. Poetic justice, they said. I'd call it necessary. Naomi exhaled. You did what most people dream about doing. No, I said, placing the glass down. I did what needed to be done, and then I stopped. We stayed silent for a moment, the kind of pause that doesn't ask to be filled. You'll rest now? She asked. I will, I said. The house needs a little time to remember it's just a home again. She laughed quietly. Understood. Enjoy the quiet, Mrs. Langford. You've earned it. The call ended with a soft click. I stood for a while, looking at the empty table. The morning light touched the surface, warm but clear, like forgiveness without words. I picked up my teacup, poured the last of yesterday's brew into it, and warmed it between my palms. It tasted faintly of salt and sweetness, both memory and closure. Through the open door, the curtain lifted with the sea breeze. The air was cool, scented with jasmine from the hedge below. I walked out onto the balcony, the floor smooth beneath my bare feet. The ocean spread before me, wide, endless, clean. Gulls circled far above, their wings catching the light like folded paper. I leaned against the railing, listening. The waves didn't celebrate. They simply returned and withdrew over and over, as they always had. I watched them and thought about what Naomi said. Poetic justice. Maybe she was right. Or maybe justice wasn't poetry at all. Maybe it was something simpler, the steady restoration of balance after too much noise. Behind me, the house was still. The faint ticking of the wall clock reached my ears, precise and patient. Time moving forward again. I closed my eyes and breathed. The salt in the air felt sharp, alive, the kind of air that clears everything it touches. Justice never shouts, I whispered again, more to the sea than to myself. It just lingers. A gull called in reply, distant but clear. I thought of David then, of the email from earlier that morning, his apology written in hesitant lines. I didn't see the whole truth. I hadn't answered yet. Maybe I didn't need to. Some lessons, like tides, teach themselves in time. The wind lifted a corner of the tablecloth that had been left to dry. It fluttered once and settled again. The morning sun caught the crystal bowls by the window, scattering small prisms across the room. It was enough. Not a victory, not a defeat, but a return. I turned back to the table, took the last glass in my hands, and placed it carefully into the cabinet. The sound it made, a soft click against the shelf, felt like the closing of a chapter. Outside, the water shone brighter, the day warming. I stayed by the balcony door, letting the light reach me. Thanksgiving had ended, but gratitude hadn't. The day had folded into quiet rhythm again. Afternoon light rested softly against the white curtains, the kind that doesn't demand attention. It just stays, patient and warm. The sea outside murmured faintly, a heartbeat under everything. I sat at the small desk in my study, the one I'd moved from Santa Barbara years ago. Its surface carried scratches from decades of grading papers and penciling notes for students who never learned to keep margins straight. Beside me lay my old teacher's notebook, brown leather, edges curled like memory itself. I had begun writing again. Not lessons exactly, just reflections. Halfway down the page, under a line about truth and timing, my phone buzzed. I smiled before looking. Only one person still called instead of texting. Clara Finch, I said softly, answering. Her voice came through clear, a trace of satisfaction beneath the calm. It's official. Forgery confirmed, metadata verified, and their lawyer withdrew the complaint this morning. I leaned back, pen still in hand. Already? They had no ground left, she replied. The chain of evidence was airtight. We even received a thank you note from the Herald for maintaining integrity under public scrutiny. That's rare, I murmured. Justice likes documentation, she said dryly. And you, my dear, gave it quite a show, I chuckled. Showmanship was never my goal. No, Clara agreed, but pedagogy always was. That made me pause. The word pedagogy carried me back to chalkboards and early mornings, to years when truth was something you could teach in a room full of restless minds. Good, I said finally. Let them rest, the lessons learned. On the other end, I heard her smile. Still teaching, aren't you? Always, I answered. We stayed quiet for a moment, the line filled with the faint hum of coastal air between us. Then Clara added, There's something else. The community college board reached out to me this morning. They've seen the coverage. They're starting a public ethics lecture series about integrity, communication, and digital accountability. They want you to open it. I blinked. Me? Who better? She said simply. You lived the case. You didn't just argue morality. You practiced it. Quietly. Thoroughly. I hesitated. I'm not sure I want a microphone again. It's not a stage, Clara said. It's a classroom. Just larger. I smiled at that. Maybe. Think about it, she continued. The world still needs teachers who don't need applause. The kettle whistled softly in the background, and I reached to turn it off. You always knew how to make an argument sound like advice. It's my gift, she laughed. Or your trick, I countered gently. Call it both, she said. Anyway, I'll email the official report for your records. Everything's sealed, archived, and notarized. You're legally untouchable now. Thank you, Clara. You earned it, she said simply. You turned a personal insult into a public precedent. That's not small. I let the words settle, tracing the rim of my teacup. It wasn't revenge, I said quietly. It was clarity. That's what good justice feels like, she replied. Clarity with paperwork. I laughed, the first true laugh in days. Now you sound like me. Maybe I learned something too, she said. Lesson 10. Choose your students wisely. That one, I said. I'll allow. For a moment we both listened, to the sound of our own small silences. Finally, Clara exhaled. All right, Professor, go enjoy your piece. I'll send the documents within the hour. I'll file them under closure, I said. Appropriate, she replied. Talk soon, Pat. Goodbye, Clara. The line clicked, the sound crisp and satisfying. I set the phone down and looked at the notebook still open on the desk. The last line I'd written before the call read, Justice doesn't end a story. It restores the setting. I added another sentence beneath it, in slow, neat handwriting. Lesson 10. The classroom never really closes. The ink spread evenly across the page. I waited for it to dry before closing the cover. The sound, the soft thud of leather meeting wood, carried through the quiet room like punctuation. Outside, the wind shifted. The curtains lifted, revealing a small strip of sea, sunlight glinting on its surface. I stood, stretched, and walked toward the balcony. The afternoon air was crisp, touched by salt. From here, the coastline stretched endlessly. No noise, no scandal, just the rhythm of waves breaking in perfect sequence. The gulls had returned, tracing slow circles above the cliffs. I leaned on the railing, the phone still warm in my hand. Somewhere, in the city's offices, Clara was signing the final forms. Somewhere else, Sophie and David were facing their silence. And here, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Not above them, not beyond them, just apart. The afternoon had grown quiet again. The waves outside were softer now, their rhythm slower, as if the ocean itself was catching its breath. I had just finished watering the garden when a faint sound reached me. 3 gentle knocks on the front gate. Not urgent, just polite. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door. Through the glass, I saw a small figure standing on the porch, sunlight behind him. A boy, thin shoulders, neat hair, both hands holding a foil-covered plate. Pumpkin pie. I opened the door. Eli? He nodded, smiling the way only children can, cautious but bright. "Dad said I could visit." For a moment, words didn't come. Then I stepped aside. "Then come in, young man." He crossed the threshold carefully, shoes squeaking against the floor. The smell of cinnamon and butter followed him in. He looked around the living room as if it were a museum. The wide windows, the sea beyond, the framed photos still resting on the mantel from last night's dinner. "I brought this," he said, lifting the pie. "Mom didn't bake it. I did, with Grandma's recipe, from your book." I smiled, taking it from him. "Then it's already perfect." We sat together on the couch. The room felt warmer with him there, as if the walls recognized his laughter. I fetched 2 plates, sliced a piece for each of us, and poured a bit of milk into his glass. He ate quickly at first, then slowed down, watching me between bites. "I saw the video," he said softly. I looked at him. "Did you?" He nodded, eyes serious now. Everyone at school was talking about it, but my teacher said, "Sometimes grown-ups forget how to tell the truth nicely." A small laugh escaped me. "Your teacher sounds wise." He shrugged. "She likes you. She said to give you this." He reached into his backpack and pulled out an envelope, cream paper, a bit crumpled at the edges. I unfolded it carefully. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Eli showed remarkable empathy this week. He defended a classmate from being blamed unfairly. His reasoning was calm, thoughtful, almost teacher-like. Mrs. Grant." For a long second, I didn't move. The ink shimmered slightly under the afternoon light. My throat tightened, but in a way that felt clean, not heavy. "He learns faster than adults," I said quietly, folding the letter. Eli grinned. "She said that too." We sat without talking for a while. The pie cooled on our plates. Outside, the horizon had begun to turn gold again. "Grandma," he said finally, "are you mad at Dad?" I turned to him, studying the curve of his small face, the same jawline his father had at that age. "No," I said, "not mad, just waiting for him to learn." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. "He said he'll call you tonight." "I'll answer," I promised. Eli leaned back, satisfied. His feet didn't quite touch the floor. We finished the pie slowly. Crumbs dotted the table. He told me about school, about the class pet hamster, about how he wanted to learn piano because music can make people behave better. I listened, smiling, hearing bits of myself in his words. When it was time to go, he stood and brushed the crumbs from his shirt. "Can I come again next weekend?" "You don't even have to ask," I said. "Just knock." He nodded, then ran a few steps before turning back. "Grandma?" "Yes?" "Mrs. Grant said, you're still a teacher, even when you don't have a class." I felt the sting of tears, light but real. "She's right." He waved once and disappeared through the gate, sunlight wrapping around him as he went. I stood there until his small figure was gone, then looked down at the letter in my hand. The handwriting trembled slightly, not from age but from care. I placed it on the table beside the empty teacup. The steam had faded, but its warmth lingered in the air. Justice had ended. Healing had begun.